So on the lead up to this fight, Parker versus Dimitrenko, I sensed there were two definite schools of thought. I think there were those who thought Dimitrenko was a real threat to Parker, and those like myself who were perhaps slightly unconvinced about Dimitrenko. Dimitrenko has been a name on the peripheries of the heavyweight division for many, many years. But fundamentally, if you actually look at BoxRec, and if you try and pull out the best three people that he's beaten, it's clear that Dimitrenko, in terms of his winning form, has been operating at a very, very low level. The times he's stepped up to borderline elite level, he's lost. Eddie Chambers, Kubrat Pulev, now Joseph Parker. Now, I predicted Parker to win this fight easily. I actually predicted Parker to win the fight by stoppage. I'm not quite sure I thought he was going to win it this easily. The performance from Parker, third round stoppage, was almost farcically easy. You know, Dimitrenko offered very, very, very little resistance. But for me, this was always going to be an easy fight for Parker. And as I said in my video in the lead up to this fight, styles make fights. And whilst Dimitrenko could potentially be viewed as a decent-ish heavyweight in certain circles, against a guy like Joseph Parker, he's easy work. And I said this all along. Fundamentally, Dimitrenko is a guy who was going to stand off Parker and who was going to look to establish his jab. In this fight, you can see Dimitrenko on the back foot. You can see him trying to keep the distance. You can see him throwing a pouring jab. Fundamentally, Parker's footwork was better. Parker's punch variety was better. Parker's speed was better. How many times did Dimitrenko throw a jab and see that Parker was nowhere near the end of it? Parker was just able to take a step back and avoid it. How many times was Parker able to counter Dimitrenko and catch him and time him? Simply put, Dimitrenko was trying to fight the style of fight that was easy work for Joseph Parker. I did think Parker would get the stoppage here. I looked at some of the troubles that Pulev and Eddie Chambers gave Dimitrenko, and I thought to myself, Parker's got more power than both of those guys, and he's also more aggressively minded than both of those guys. They're both cautious, technically minded boxers, whereas Parker's a bit more aggressive, a bit higher output, a bit more offensively minded, and I think that's what we saw today. Really, this was easy work from Parker from start to finish, and he did throw some lovely punches in there. There was some real nice power shots that he caught Dimitrenko flush with. There was some good timing, some good combinations, but really, did we learn anything from Joseph Parker here? Probably not. Did Dimitrenko offer enough resistance to be impressed by Parker's performance? If I'm honest, probably not. You know, we simply didn't really see enough from Dimitrenko. Dimitrenko didn't cause enough problems. He didn't pose enough questions to really leave thinking that this was an overly taking performance from Joseph Parker. But he did what he had to do. He beat what was in front of him, and he did that in very, very, very definitive fashion. But that kind of fighter is always going to be easy work for Joseph Parker. A slow, lumbering, awkward guy who gives him space and throws a weak jab from range. It's going to be very, very easy work for Parker. As I've said, the kind of guy who's going to cause him trouble for me is the guy who gets on the inside. It's the guy who takes away his space. It's the guy who puts him on the back foot. None of those things Dimitrenko brought to the party today. And as a result, as I say, it ended up being easy work. Now, Dimitrenko's heart has kind of always been in question. His chin hasn't ever been in question. You know, he's always shown a solid enough jaw, but it's more been his heart, not his chin. The Kubrat Pulev fight is the main piece of evidence for that. Now, Pulev's a good fighter. Pulev was beating Dimitrenko soundly, but Dimitrenko kind of gave up in that fight, and I think he retired late in the fight when it looked like he wasn't ever really hurt. And for me, I guess it's fair to say that the same thing happened again today against Parker, admittedly at a much earlier stage of the fight, where we saw Dimitrenko, for my money, basically quitting in the third round. Now, Dimitrenko had been bundled over several times in the first round and the second round. Unclear to me whether they were all genuine knockdowns. Certainly one in the second round looked like he was pretty much thrown to the ground as opposed to a clean punch landing. But regardless, Dimitrenko was having a tough time in there, and I believe it was clear from the third round onwards he didn't have too much of a chance of winning this fight. Now, he was in a clinch with Parker, and Parker lands a shot to his body, and Dimitrenko takes a knee. Parker then follows it up with another body shot whilst Dimitrenko's on a knee. Now, what happens next is fairly farcical. Dimitrenko, a big 6'6", 6'7" heavyweight, is rolling around the floor like he's been shot. Like he's in agony. It didn't look like much more than a cuffing shot from Parker. Clearly, Dimitrenko sensed this as a way out. My personal take on it was that he was trying to get Parker disqualified. Parker just landed a punch on him whilst Dimitrenko was down on a knee. And I think Dimitrenko was looking for the easy way out and hoping that Parker would be disqualified for landing that punch. Now that's something I wanted to touch on. Dimitrenko's behaviour was comical. It was bad acting. I believe the commentator said it was an Oscar-winning performance. Having said that, I believe it was a very poor decision and actually a sign of inexperience for Joseph Parker to throw that punch. It was a really needless punch. He was well up in the fight. He was fighting a guy who didn't look like he could trouble him. You know, he was hurting Dimitrenko regularly. Why did he need to throw a short cuffing punch to the body whilst Dimitrenko was down on his knee? For me, even though clearly that punch didn't cause damage, and this is possibly controversial, but there is actually an argument that Joseph Parker could have been disqualified there. Fundamentally, he threw and landed a punch on a guy who had taken a knee. Now, in heavyweight boxing, in any boxing, if someone's on a knee, they've been knocked down. Joseph Parker landed a punch to Dimitrenko's body. Dimitrenko took a knee. For me, that should have been ruled a knockdown. Joseph Parker then proceeds to land another punch whilst Dimitrenko is technically knocked down. Even though the punch was a bit of a sloppy punch, even though it was a punch that I don't believe caused any damage to Dimitrenko like Dimitrenko suggested, it was an illegal punch, and it was a completely needless punch from Parker. Having watched the tape back, I'm convinced Parker was aware Dimitrenko was down on a knee. Perhaps out of frustration, perhaps out of wanting to get the job done, he threw another punch. And it really, really could have cost him. It was so needless, and it was a risk that simply wasn't worth taking, given how the fight had proceeded to that point. And yeah, for me it was inexperienced, and it could have gotten disqualified. And Parker's got to be very conscious, you know. He's moving up to fighting some of the elite fighters in the heavyweight division now. Now, if he came to the UK and fought a guy like Anthony Joshua, the public hero over here, on an Eddie Hearn show, in front of 20,000 UK fans, and he got disqualified for throwing a punch in those circumstances, it may not be fair, it may not be right, but fundamentally he'd only have himself to blame. I think he was actually quite lucky, and I think the fact that he was fighting at home on his home show in front of his home crowd probably helped him out. But he really cannot be that inexperienced if he's going into Deontay Wilder's backyard, if he's going over to the States to fight Andy Ruiz, if he's going into the UK to fight Anthony Joshua. He cannot be giving judges, referees, promoters chances to take opportunities away from him, because that's what he just did. He gave them a chance to rob him of that fight, a fight that he was winning with ease. So it's something to be really mindful of, and for me, if I was his trainer, I'd be having a stern word with him over that. As for this, it was such easy work for Parker, he could fight again very quickly. There's a lot of talk about a Joshua fight in November, potentially a Ruiz fight now, but you know, there's nothing that happened in that fight which would prevent Parker from fighting again next month, which is good. My opinions on how that fight would go haven't really changed, because I think we've got to get into context what Parker beat today. You know, a lot of people are saying Dimitrenko is some kind of world beater, some kind of world-class fighter, trying to hype the victory for Parker. And I'm a Parker fan, but I'm also a realist. Dimitrenko has never beaten anyone of any note, and the performance he put on today was farcical. For me, the only time that Parker has fought a genuine top 20 heavyweight was Carlos Takam, and that was a great win. But let's be honest, Carlos Takam caused him a lot of problems. Carlos Takam exposed some areas of weakness in his game, and from what we've seen since, there's nothing really I've seen that has highlighted to me that those have yet been edited. They may have been, but it hasn't been exhibited and displayed in the ring. So, good work from Parker to beat a name, and to beat a name in the third round. You know, he looked good in there. Did we learn anything from it? No. Can we be convinced he's ready off the back of that performance? No. But did he beat what was put in front of him, and did he do it well? Yes. So fair play to him for that. Be interesting to see where he goes next. Will he fight Parker? Or will he fight Joshua? Will he fight Ruiz? We'll have to see. But as soon as it's announced, you'll be sure that I'll do a video.
going to try and do a video on Izu Ugoni's fight as well. So if you're new to the channel, please take the time to subscribe so you can check those out. I'd really be grateful as well if you could take the time to hit the thumbs up button and give the video a like. Many thanks for watching, people. Do leave your comments in the section below. Cheers.